Hey guys, if you're just joining us, you can say hi in the comments and let us know where you're joining from. Hi, Haidar from Nigeria, Collins from Uyo, um, how to pronounce Wariso from Uganda. Yeah, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Like I said, if you're just joining, just say hi in the comments and let us know where you're joining from. I am Nyior Clement, your host, and today we will be discussing how to break into AI engineering in 2026. And to unpack this topic, I am joined by Marina, a senior applied scientist at Twitch, who has helped hundreds of people transition into AI engineering. Without further ado, I present to you our guests. We're excited to have you on this stream, Marina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How is it going?
Doing well. What about you?
Awesome. Let's get started, shall we?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so AI engineering is quite new, right?
Mhm.
Relatively speaking. So a lot of people are asking, what is an AI engineer? Could you help us understand that?
Yeah, that's a really good question because since the term is so new, there's a lot of ambiguity in the field and there's a lot of overlap with adjacent roles. So, the definition I use for AI engineering is coming from the book AI Engineering, written by Chip Huyen. And she differentiates AI engineers from machine learning engineers or data scientists in the following way. Well, a data scientist or a machine learning engineer would train models from scratch. So that might mean, say, I work at a bank and I have a lot of transaction history for previous transactions, and I know which ones ended up being fraudulent. I would train a custom model using my bank's data to predict future transactions, whether they're fraud or not. With an AI engineer, they actually aren't training models from scratch, but instead using pre trained foundation models. So that would be something like one of the models from Claude or OpenAI or Llama or DeepSeek. And then they build applications on top of those foundation models using techniques like prompt engineering, RAG, fine tuning, and increasingly agent systems.
Great. So what I am hearing in summary is that machine learning engineers build and train models from scratch,
Mhm.
while AI engineers build on top of these existing foundation models. Is that
Yep,
correct?
exactly.
Let's build on that. So, what would you say are the skills someone would need to develop to be able to do a job like that, like building on top of foundation models?
Mhm. So, at its core, AI engineering requires relatively strong software engineering skills because you'll be building applications and products that are actually used by users.
Yeah.
So, typically, that means Python and just general software engineering fundamentals like working with basic code architecture. And then, additionally, you need the skills to actually use the foundation models appropriately. So it's very, very easy to just call an API, get a response back, and call that done. But in production, that's not going to be sufficient. So it's also important to understand not only how to write a good prompt, but how to experiment with different prompts. How do you actually pick which model is the appropriate model for your use case? How can you set up your RAG system so that it operates most efficiently and you can evaluate that performance end to end? So it's really about having kind of software engineering fundamentals and then the specialization on top that allows you to build really strong, high quality production systems.
Great. So I think we have a good picture of what the role is about and the skills needed. Let's talk about the learning journey a bit, right?
Mhm.
So, and for those joining us, I'll get back to the question. For those joining us just now, say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're joining us from. And so far, we've talked about what an AI engineer is, the skills you need to develop to become an AI engineer. Eventually, we're going to cover things like where you will learn, how you could learn, and how you could also go from learning to landing your first role. So stay with us to the end of the stream. Speaking of learning, right, Marina, if someone were starting from scratch today,
Mhm.
what would you recommend they start with, and where do they go from there?
Yeah. So if you're really starting from an absolute beginner, you have no previous technical experience, I think learning to code is an obvious place to start. And there's a couple reasons for that. Even though we're increasingly using AI coding tools, coding is still fundamental to AI engineering. And then if
Yeah.
it turns out you get started on this path and you're actually not a super big fan of working in AI engineering, having solid coding foundations gives you the opportunity to pivot into adjacent fields. So you could, change your mind and go into software engineering or data science or data engineering. So I think that that's a really great place to start because it gives you a taste for what you'd be doing on the job and gives you a lot of opportunity to change your mind if that turns out to be a better path for you in the future. So that would be step one. I'm happy to go into the next steps, but let me know what you're curious about.
Yeah. We could move on to what someone could go from there, from like after learning how to build software. What's the next step?
Mhm. So, an interesting thing in most AI engineering and machine learning courses is they'll spend a lot of time on math. And there is some benefit to understanding intuitively what's happening when these models are trained at a high level. But I would avoid spending too long really digging into the details of math and definitely not to the point where you're spending weeks and months hand calculating things. So, the reason for that is in practice, if you are training models from scratch, you really should have an intuition for why models behave the way they do under the hood so that you can improve the quality and debug when things go wrong. But for AI engineers, you're never, I can fairly confidently say, never going to be debugging training of a model. And so I think that spending even closer to hours rather than weeks on math is sufficient to have an understanding intuitively of how these models work so that you can maybe pick a better one in a given case, but not dig too deep into a path that won't be as practical for you when you're actually on the job. So in my opinion, I really like 3 Blue 1 Brown and StatQuest on YouTube. And I think that's really enough math. If you were to do 3 Blue 1 Brown's Essence of Linear Algebra and Essence of Calculus series, you'd be really set up for success for AI engineering and then ready to move on to the next steps.
I'm really, really happy you pointed that out because I think I made that mistake too when I was
We all did.
trying to learn how to compute the chain rule by hand or
Exactly.
matrix multiplication. And I also recommend Tree Blue Brown because it helps to like build an intuition for these topics. So, like, how far can just learning how to build software and learning the maths get you? So, do you become like a beginner AI engineer, intermediate, or beyond? Or do you need to learn other things as well?
Yeah, I would say that math and programming are more the foundational skills that allow you
Okay.
to learn AI engineering skills after that. So they're the prerequisites.
Oh,
Um, yeah, once you have those, then you'll be in a much better situation once you start taking courses or building projects to develop AI engineering skills specifically. So I would recommend spending a little bit of time on machine learning fundamentals, even if you're going into AI engineering. And by a little bit
mhm.
of time, again, I mean on the order of hours and days, not weeks and months, but just enough that you understand concepts like supervised versus unsupervised learning. What is overfitting? What are common evaluation metrics? Just that kind of thing, because oftentimes as an AI engineer, you'll be working with data scientists or machine learning engineers who are going to use this language, and you need to be able to understand what they're talking about. And at that point, you would have really everything you need to start getting into AI engineering specific skills. So, the most entry level skill is really effective prompt engineering. So, approaching it more as a science rather than just kind of typing a prompt and hoping that it works.
Yeah.
Um, And then you can start building some things using retrieval augmented generation, where maybe you are prompting a system that has access to the files on your desktop or company documents or whatever the case may be, so that you can get more specific questions answered with your custom data. And iteratively build up complexity as you get comfortable with these baseline skills and you want to add additional skills over time.
So where do you go to from this foundational skills, machine learning, RAG, and then what next? It would be helpful if we could think about this in terms of going from, let's say, beginner AI engineer to intermediate, and then intermediate to advanced or professional AI engineer.
Yeah. So I think once you kind of have the foundational programming, math, maybe a little bit of machine learning fundamentals, the way that I like to learn and develop skills is I do like to take courses and read books at the beginning. So I think when
Okay.
you're brand new, it's really helpful to take a follow-on along course or watch a series of YouTube videos or read a book. So AI Engineering the book is a really great place to start. It can be a little bit tricky if you're a brand new beginner, but that's okay. You just kind of go slow.
Yeah.
And the reason that I like courses at the beginning is because it's helpful to even know what exists in the field. So you
Okay.
won't know what you can build until you've seen it. And once you
Okay.
know what you can build, that would be the next step from beginner to intermediate when you start building things on your own. So I
Oh,
would say absolute beginner AI engineer is you can do follow along tutorials, you can build projects from within a course. Basically, if someone tells you what to do, you can implement it. And then
okay.
to get to that next level, building projects where you didn't necessarily have everything laid out for you is a great way to demonstrate and solidify those skills. And ultimately, hopefully, you start building projects that are complex enough that they actually help you get a job as well.
Great. I see that more people are still joining. You're welcome. Like I said before, if you have your questions prepared already, please leave them in the comments. We'll eventually look at them. Yes. So moving on, right? I've heard of AI agents, MCPs. Do they have a place in AI engineering as well, or does it just end up building retrieval augmented systems?
No, of course. So I think it depends a little bit what kind of company you're working for. In
Okay.
practice, a large majority of production AI engineering systems are basically just RAG and prompt engineering. But
Oh,
increasingly, we are adding agents in production. And every aspiring AI engineer should definitely have that in their toolkit, because I think it will become increasingly widely used as we figure out some of the details about how to put agents into production efficiently. So yes, definitely comfort with agents, and MCP is also something that we're using all of the time now. So I would say
yeah.
those are definitely areas to get really good at. The only thing that I see less commonly in industry is fine tuning. So it
Oh,
does happen. Of course, there are absolutely use cases for fine tuning, but I think beginners have a tendency to spend more time on fine tuning than they should, given they they would probably go farther in their career getting really good at RAG, evaluation, systematic prompt engineering, and agents.
great. So you earlier mentioned how AI engineering is a subfield. It's a discipline on top of software engineering itself, right? Um, I imagine beyond the AI powered systems, there should be other things potential AI engineers should be thinking about as well. Um, when building systems end to end, could you point out some of those things? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're thinking kind of entry level AI engineering, getting into the
Mhm.
field,
Yeah.
you'll for sure want to have a solid understanding of all the things that a beginner software engineer would as well. So you should
Yeah.
understand how to work effectively with GitHub, containerization with Docker, basic cloud platforms, and their fundamental services that you would be using frequently,
Yeah.
and start thinking about system design as you grow in your career. So typically for
Yeah.
junior roles, system design isn't as important because you'll be working with someone more senior most of the time. And
Yeah.
that more senior person will be making those system design decisions. But as you advance, that is increasingly something that is checked in interviews and that you'll be responsible for. So thinking about how to build efficient and scalable, maintainable, and really important secure systems is going to be a big differentiator.
Great. So I think we have a good understanding of the topics, right? We need to learn. But there are different ways to learn. How should someone decide between self-study, a boot camp, or an MSc, or even a PhD? Yeah.
Yeah. So there are pros and cons to every path, and which one makes sense for you really depends on your particular situation and background.
Mm-hmm.
So self-study has the benefit of being low cost, and you can follow the changes in the technology more quickly. So you don't have to wait for someone to adjust curriculum. If there's a new tool that's come out that's become a really critical part of the toolkit, you can learn it right away. However, the downsides of self-study are it is much harder to stay motivated. You don't have someone to ask questions. You don't have a network necessarily unless you go out of your way to build that, which I would definitely recommend. And of course, now we are living in a world where your resume or your CV is typically screened by an automated resume screener before a human actually reads it. And so if you're missing credentials, if the job description calls for a master's degree and you don't have one and it's just self-study, you might never actually get seen by a person. So that's definitely something to consider. There are ways around that through really effective networking, but it's just harder. So I think that's something to be realistic about with the self-study path. It is doable, but you will need to be creative and be willing to work really hard. Boot camps are a bit of a bridge. So boot camps also struggle from the credential issue. If you're going for a job that lists a particular degree, a boot camp isn't going to help you get there. But where it has an advantage over self-study is it gives you a structured curriculum to keep you on point. If you're somebody who really needs deadlines and feedback, that can be helpful. And boot camps often have instructors who are from industry. So they can give you some insight into what production systems look like in the companies that they work for and potentially help connect you to their network. So boot camps can be a nice option if you're someone who struggles with self-motivated learning and you have the budget for it. So you might think from what I've said that a master's degree is the obvious choice because of the credential issue, but I actually think there's some nuance there as well, because master's degrees are often expensive depending on where you live, and they take a very long time, while at the same time typically having outdated curriculum. So usually in academia, they are not on the cutting edge of whatever's happening in tech. So you might spend 2 or 3 years learning things that are from 2015, and then you graduate and you don't actually have the skills you need to be successful in the job market. But you wouldn't run into the resume screening thing. So I think it's really a matter of your preferences. Like, do you want to be somebody who's spending more time on networking and trying to find a way around the resume screeners? Or do you want to spend more time trying to up level after a master's degree to get to the point where you could be competitive for modern roles? So I wish there was a cut and dry answer of this is always the best decision, but it really depends on where you're coming from and your learning style.
Yeah, I think I know you've not really said go for this, but I still find it insightful because it always tells us down to the needs, the preferences of the specific person. Yeah, I'm curious about one more thing though. So you've coached hundreds of people over the years,
Yes.
right? What are some of the most common mistakes you've seen beginners make or people trying to break into this field? It would be nice if you can also comment on how they can avoid those mistakes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So interestingly, a lot of it has to do with mindset rather than technical skills. So one thing I've seen very consistently is people will not start applying to jobs or not start building bigger projects because they don't think they're ready yet. And they'll just kind of push off actually putting themselves out there forever. And so if
Yeah.
you ever start actually applying to jobs, you never get the feedback on what skills you have that maybe need to be improved for interviews, or what skills you're lacking, or where your gaps are. And you also never give yourself the opportunity to maybe just get a job, because you might actually be more successful than you think. So I think
Yeah.
being willing to put yourself out there even when you don't feel ready, and potentially be rejected sometimes, because that's part of the game. Like, it's going to happen. And approaching each potential failure as a learning point rather than a reflection on you and your skills. And that's kind of another point related to this, which is understanding that most people in the field, I would say almost everybody, has failed. They've failed more times than you as a beginner, right? Like, they've applied to jobs and been rejected. They've done interviews and failed them. They've tried to learn how to do leak code problems and done a bad job for weeks and months and years. And so having a bit of a beginner's mindset where failure is just data, and it's an opportunity to learn and grow, rather than saying that you're not good enough. We're basically trying to avoid imposter syndrome by embracing being a beginner as a necessary step in, at one point, becoming successful. So I would say, like, and it's actually mostly about this kind of trying to get yourself to be confident enough to just take the jump. And however that looks for you, because usually we are the thing holding ourselves back more than our technical skills or the job market or anything else.
I really like some of the points you've made, and I want to go deeper into that towards the end of this interview. But for now, I think this is the perfect place to transition into what I think the audience would most likely be curious about. We've talked about learning, what topics to study, how to even learn. Now, how can someone go from learning to landing their first role, right? And one question I've heard over and over again is, for someone who has been learning AI engineering for some time, from a hiring perspective, what evidence would convince you that they're ready for their first AI engineering role, if there's anything like that?
Yeah. So I think what's helpful here is to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager. When they're hiring someone, they're not looking for someone who's demonstrated that they have the skills. They're looking for someone who can do the job. And those are slightly different things. So you want
Okay.
to build experience through, it'll probably be through your projects. I'll talk about that in a second, that gets as close to the actual job as possible. So that means giving yourself the kind of constraints that you would have when working on the job. So considering things like cost and latency and security, and also building something really end to end that mimics what we would do on the job as close as possible. So you could do this through personal projects. So you might find something in your life that's annoying, potentially. So I like starting with problems first. Where do you feel friction in your life? Where is there something that you could automate or make more efficient? Or do you know somebody who maybe owns a small business and you could help them automate something in their business? Even a hobby group, like let's say you have like a D&D group, could you build something to help coordinate or facilitate something there? So you can build personal projects that are comprehensive in terms of finding your own data source, scoping the structure yourself, having evaluation and monitoring in place, deploying it, probably having some kind of UI. So really this end-to-end self-motivated project. Or even better is if you can do a project like this for an actual client. So this is probably not going to be paid at first, but maybe you could find a nonprofit or someone that, or like, let's say you volunteer at an animal shelter. Could you help them maybe make an AI engineering automation to help them with something in their business or in their nonprofit? But maybe you have something that you already care about, so you would feel good about donating your time. I'm never suggesting working for free in some kind of exploitative manner. I always mean, like, if you have a friend you could help, a family member who has a business, a nonprofit you care about, a club that you like how could you feel happy about building something and also get the experience of building it for a real client, so that when you put it on your resume or your CV, it's not just I did this project and it just lives in GitHub, but it's a real system or a real product that users are actually interacting with, and hopefully you even get some impact metrics from that. So that's my favorite way to make the transition from student to actual applied engineer without anyone having to give you a job, because that first job is really hard. So this is kind of like a back path.
Great. I'm happy you mentioned transition from student to applied engineer, because I think I really like your story. I find it inspiring, like your early days in the field. So before your master's, you studied political science and had never worked in tech before, right?
Yep.
And then you completed your master's in 2020,
Yep.
and you landed an ML-focused data science role at Coursera the same year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really impressive. What was your job search process like? And it would be nice if you could mention some of the things that you feel, looking back now, made all the difference for you.
Yeah, for sure. So throughout my master's program, because it was like slightly technical, but it wasn't a
Okay.
real machine learning program. I had
Yeah.
some, like I had Python courses and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, but I needed to learn additional things on my own.
Mhm.
So throughout the program, I did additional self-study, and I made sure to document everything as I was learning, and that'll come back in a second. So I wrote blogs, and just made sure that I had really good notes. And so once it actually came time for applying to jobs, at the time I wasn't as strategic as I would be now. I basically just applied on LinkedIn to everything that I could. I think I applied to 100 jobs before I got my first interview. So at that time, it was mostly just sending things out randomly. If I were to do it again today, I would focus much more on referrals and networking. I think that would have saved me a lot of time because, like I said, I was just sending applications into thin air. And when you're a beginner, it's hard to get through those really popular job board sites. So yeah. But
Yeah.
once I got that first interview, I really, really, really took it seriously. And I think this is something that not only beginners, but everyone has a tendency to underestimate, is how much you can prepare for an interview to set yourself up for success. So once I got that first interview, which was at Coursera, I spent 150 hours studying. I went crazy because I didn't have any other opportunities, right? This was my
Yeah.
one shot. So I
Yeah.
went back and reviewed everything that I had studied. I came up with examples for behavioral questions. I really, really looked into their particular data science and machine learning problems, to the point that I had actually studied so much about the machine learning system that I was interviewing to work on. I had studied so much that when they asked me an interview question, I already had an answer for it because I had paid so much attention to how they were actually doing things. So
Yeah.
this over preparation, I think, is extremely useful for beginners because you're not going to be able to rely on your past experience. You're going to have to come in and show potential and enthusiasm, and having a really strong understanding of the company that you're interviewing for in advance shows that potential and enthusiasm where your technical skills might be lacking.
I really would love to ask some follow-up questions, but I would like us to see what the audience are saying in the comments quickly. Uh, so we have, sorry if I'm murdering your name right now, but we have Ravi saying, I have been working as a developer experience engineer since last 6 years, and I know the basics of Python and good
Mhm.
theoretical knowledge on machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing. Could you please explain how I could leverage my experience to get into AI engineering?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty good place to start because you already have a lot of those foundations that we talked about. So you would be able to jump straight in to learning the specific skills that separate AI engineering from any other engineering field. In a practical term, the way I would suggest starting actually is just to read the book AI Engineering by Chip Huyen, because it'll give you a really great overview of the field. And from there, you can kind of dig into particular areas that you feel most interested in and start building projects. So,
Great. Ravi, I hope that answers your question. We have another question from David. So it reads, you said we should learn how to program. what programming languages should we focus on with regards to the software development you spoke about?
Yep, for AI engineering, it's easy. The answer is Python. So some AI engineers do use other languages. There are AI engineers working in JavaScript or Go, but the vast majority is in Python, and it would be an expectation that you know Python, even if you end up actually working in another language as well. So I would definitely start with Python.
Great. Then we have another question. As a beginner in this field, would you endorse the idea of no-code AI, where people use tools, hence avoiding math, programming to an extent? Also, do you think this is a limited path?
Yeah, I would say it's an adjacent path. So personally, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the AI automation for non-technical businesses space. So you can think of a dentist's office, right? They are not going to hire a software engineer, or an AI engineer, but they probably need someone to help them triage customer inquiries or manage their email or get rid of some manual data entry that they're doing. So I think, this is just my personal opinion, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people who are medium technical to do consulting or work for consulting agencies that help non-technical small and medium businesses implement AI into their businesses. So these no-code tools could be a very lucrative path to doing that kind of work. But the no-code tools will not get you to being an AI engineer who's building real systems. If you wanted to build like a real production system at a tech company or a large financial institution, working with engineers, that's not going to get you there. But it's almost a different specialization in my mind.
Great. I think I want to cycle back to the point you're making earlier, your job application search.
Sure.
You mentioned how you would advise people network, ask for referrals more, be more strategic about it. Are there other things you recommend for someone wanting to replicate your approach, at least? Are there other things you recommend they do differently to go from learning to landing their first role?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on both, but I'll dig in a little bit deeper. So having projects that replicate real world production systems as closely as possible is kind of a baseline. But then from there, as a beginner, it can be really, really challenging to actually get seen by a recruiter or a hiring manager if you just send your resume in through LinkedIn. Because there's 1,000 people, 800 of them are more experienced than you. What are you going to do? But in this case, we need to be a little bit more creative about how we actually get seen. And so that's why networking is so important. And so I'd like to, I'll go in a little bit of detail about that. So in person is the best. If there are local meetups, for sure, go to them. I think it's a great opportunity to meet people. I've had multiple mentees get jobs just from somebody that they met. They were interviewed, perfect. Now they don't have to go through the pile of resumes to actually get an interview. If that's not an option for you, which is very, very normal for many people, there aren't local meetups. You can network effectively on LinkedIn, but there's a specific way you need to do it, in my opinion. So I don't love the approach of just sending people a message on LinkedIn and asking for a referral, and that's it. You might get some, and it can work, but you're going to get ignored a lot, and you might be a little bit annoying. So when I get those, I'm like, I don't really love it. But there's another thing that you can do where you, instead of going straight for asking for something from someone, you can make a more engaging relationship over the longer term. And the way I like to do this is look at the companies and teams that you might want to work for, find out who works on those teams, and then do things like read their technical blogs, find out if they have a YouTube channel, read all of their papers on archive, try to figure out what these people are actually working on and what they're interested in, and then send them a message and be like, hey, I read your blog about how you guys do this kind of experiment. I thought this was really cool. I learned about a thing like that in my class, or I did a project similar. I had a question about it. That's it. So you're not asking for anything. You're just being interested in their work and showing that you are an intelligent, polite person. And then from there, if they respond, which they might not, but if they respond, you can have some nice back and forths where you just ask about their work, be curious, be polite, and then you might have an opportunity to ask for a referral either now or in the future. So these kind of connections can be really, really valuable in unexpected ways, even years later. So this isn't something I necessarily recommend doing. Like, I need a job today, I'm going to start bothering people so that I can get referrals, but more just throughout your career. How can you reach out to people and give them compliments on their work and ask engaging questions and start building that network for when it might actually be more relevant for your job search?
That was very, very insightful, at least for me. And we have another question from a product designer, Milton. He said, as a product designer, I am struggling to keep up with all the new AI design tools being released daily.
Yep.
Is it that chaotic as an AI engineer? Are your tools and processes changing as fast?
Yes. Yeah. It's chaotic for everyone. I actually, in the last 6 months, have had to set aside a few hours each week in my work calendar to catch up on all the new updates in how I'm supposed to be working, which is a little bit overwhelming. Um,
Yeah.
so there are new models constantly, there's new tools constantly. There are a couple of things we can do about this, though. So I think setting aside time that's specifically blocked for learning is really helpful, so that you're not constantly getting bombarded with like, oh, I got to do this thing, I got to learn this thing, but it's
Yeah.
just like, okay, I'll add that to the list. I'll get to it on Friday between, 10 and noon is my learning
Mhm.
time. And then also like filtering for what's actually important. So if you just hear
Yeah.
about a new tool once, we can ignore that we have to have a higher threshold for what actually gets our attention. I would
Yeah.
wait until you're seeing it in multiple newspaper or like multiple newsletters or multiple workshops, or your colleagues are starting to talk about it. Then okay, now it's time to invest. But if you follow every new development, you won't have time.
Great. So we're running out of time, and I have a couple of questions I would like to ask before we wrap things up. I think you touched on this first one a little bit, but I would want us sort of go deeper into it. So beyond technical skills, what's one quality or mindset, right, that you've seen people who had successfully transitioned into this field have?
Yeah. So I think we already talked about the most important mindset thing. So I'll talk about a more professional skill.
Okay.
And this is not going to be a surprise, but communication. Um,
Um,
so this is often overlooked, especially in interviews, because people will spend a lot of time preparing for interviews by refreshing their technical skills, which is
mhm.
great. But they should spend, in my opinion, more time on practicing how they're actually going to deliver their answers. So not only going back and learning about all the different ways that you could, chunk something for RAG, but literally practicing out loud. How do you answer the question of, tell me about yourself? Or how do you answer questions around a past project? Practice it
Yeah.
out loud, record yourself, be as clear and ideally enthusiastic as you can be while still being
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Two fun questions. Looking back now, what do you wish someone had told you when you were getting started?
Yeah, that I will never learn everything. I think that was,
Oh,
yeah, it's overwhelming
yeah,
as a beginner because you see all these tools and all these techniques, and you're like, I have to learn all
yeah,
of them. And I had a little notepad on my phone where I would, write down anything new I needed to learn. And I thought of it
yeah,
kind of like a checklist, like if I learn all these skills, then I'll be ready. But the reality is that that list never gets shorter. And you
yeah,
just, so it's more of an iterative mindset around learning throughout your career.
yeah. So then, how do you really know what to focus on, the most important things to focus
Yeah.
on?
I think there are some fundamentals that are obvious. So for AI engineering, we have, programming, basic math,
Yeah,
RAG,
yeah,
et cetera, the things we've already talked about. But then when you're going for a specific role, I like to look at job descriptions. So
okay,
I'll look at 10 to 20 job descriptions, see where the overlap is. If there's skills that are just mentioned once or twice, we can ignore them. But if you're seeing everyone talk about AWS or everyone talk about Kubernetes, then you need to, probably add that to your skills list.
mhm.
So I kind of go based on the job market.
Great. So if attendees only remember one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
I think I would say the path to AI engineering is challenging, and that is okay. Like it can also be fun if you approach it with the right mindset. That it is challenging by design, and it's okay to be a beginner, and it's going to be a little bit of a struggle at first, and that's very normal. And once you get through it, it can be such a rewarding career. So the struggle that you might feel at the beginning with learning these things and going through all the, the never-ending skills list, it pays off at the end because this job is really fun. It's really engaging. If you're someone who likes learning, it's perfect. Yeah, so I think that would be my pep talk.
Great. I see that we still have people joining and leaving questions that we might not be able to get today, sadly, but we're taking note of all of them and we'll address them in a future blog, I promise. On a closing note, Marina, what do you have going on these days, especially for people watching the stream who would want to learn more from you or even work with you directly? Where can they find you?
Sure. So I make content on YouTube. My YouTube channel is just my name, Marina Wyss AI. If you search for me, you'll find me. And then I also offer coaching. So I work with people in a group setting or one-on-one to help unblock their AI engineering or machine learning careers. So we work on projects, resumes, interview prep, whatever is most useful. Yeah, those are the main things that I offer right now.
All right. Thank you so much for coming to the stream. To the audience, thank you all for joining us. That's it for now. I will see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.